and welcome to today's webinar, Accelerate Your Journey to the Cloud. My name is Mike Anand, and I'll be your moderator today. I lead product and corporate marketing here at Redis Labs, and I'm excited to host this session. I'm pleased to introduce today's speakers with me, Tony Baer and Venkatesh Ramaswamy. Tony is the founder and CEO of DB Insights, providing an independent view on database and analytics technology ecosystem. He's a recognized industry expert on data-driven transformation. In fact, Analytics Insight named him one of the 2019 top 100 artificial intelligence and big data influencers. His combined expertise in both legacy database technologies and emerging cloud analytics technologies shapes how technology providers go to market in an industry undergoing significant transformation. We also have next Venkatesh Ramaswamy joining us today. Venkatesh is the VP of Engineering at Sharechat, a leading social media company based in India. He's responsible for development, DevOps, data platform, security, and IT and quality. And prior to his time at Sharechat, he also led teams at eBay and PayPal that focus on checkout, order, card, payments, risk, and others. Redis Enterprise Cloud was a key platform Sharechat leveraged to make a massive cloud migration from AWS to GCP. And we're really glad to have both Tony and Venkatesh be part of this webinar with us today. So let's begin with a presentation from Tony. He will be diving into different paths for cloud. And after that, we will have a fireside chat where Venkatesh, Tony, and myself will discuss key components to consider when you are thinking about migrating to cloud, as well as building new applications. And before I hand over mic to Tony, we would like you to try Redis Enterprise Cloud for free on our website at your convenience. So without further ado, I'd like to kick things off by welcoming Tony Baer. Tony, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Mike. And thank everybody for taking time out of your day to join us. And it's going to be a pretty fascinating discussion. Mike, Venkatesh, and I have actually had some very interesting discussions before this, and we hope to basically share some of this with you. My part of the presentation is really going to be, the theme is about accelerating your path. I'm going to start to take you through the first step, which is finding your path. And the fact is that there are many different types of cloud services. How to really figure out you can get the most bang for your buck. So let's dive in. So what are we going to be talking about in this part of the presentation? Well, initially, we'll take a look at why we're having this discussion. And then we'll get into the what's. This is kind of like a 5 W's in a way. First, why the cloud. Then what are the paths to the cloud? Because there's not any one singular path. And then we'll cut to the chase. And where does Redis Enterprise Cloud play in all this? Then we'll basically summarize our takeaways before we then seg back to Mike with the discussion. So anyway, let's get into the why part of this. Why are we having this discussion? And there are both, tactical and strategic reasons. And that's really the case, I think, probably for any type of technology decision. They'll have both aspects to it. On the tactical side, it can be a matter as simple as budgeting. And that traditionally, if you wanted to add new capacity, you had to justify it with capital, under the capital budget. With cloud, those become operational expenses. And because of that, that gets you out of basically the, essentially, I guess, kind of the bottleneck of having to go through capital, justifying capital expense, budgeting. And with that, because you can move quicker, it does give you the opportunity to be more agile. And depending on the type of cloud service you get, you should be able to realize benefits of operational simplification. Those benefits vary based on the type of service that you take. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. Then there are the more strategic, this is strategic side of the coin. And going to the cloud can give you the opportunity to essentially give you an on-ramp to digital transformation. We'll talk about that a little bit more. It gives you the chance, it gives you the opportunity to rethink your data silos and consolidate them so you can get new visibility. And it also allows you to, it gives you opportunities to apply new approaches to cybersecurity. And the other thing, and this comes out of the operational simplification, it gives you the opportunity to streamline IT, and mitigate any of those skills gaps, especially when it comes to setting up IT infrastructure. So how did we get here? And what you're seeing here is kind of a simplified sort of map in terms of the evolution of cloud adoption. And of course, if you really wanted to take this all the way back, you could say that maybe this all originated into time sharing back in like the 60s and 70s when very few organizations could afford computers. Won't go back that far, but there are some parallels to be drawn here in the present day. But really the modern cloud really started when AWS, or I should say when Amazon, before it was before the start of AWS, realized that in the conduct of their e-commerce business, that they had to develop a core competency in cloud infrastructure. And what they realized was they could do this pretty economically. And so therefore, why not try and monetize it? And that was the beginnings of Amazon Web Services, AWS, back in 2006. And at that point, let's say that probably the prime attraction to all this for most enterprises was basically we're very tactical, which is that we want to use this as like an application build, an app dev sandbox, especially for dev tests. Why pay for compute for just doing the testing of applications? If you could just basically run this stuff, go up an EC2 basically, and essentially just pay as you go for infrastructure to do your testing. It wasn't wasn't a huge concept leap. It wasn't like you were trying to risk, put the enterprise at risk. You're just basically testing apps, and you're not having to go through capital budgeting. The next phase really came in the early teens, and what it really don't show in this slide is that there was a ground-shaking event, earth-shattering event that happened in 2007, which is the emergence of the iPhone, which totally changed the whole mobile experience from flip phones and having conversations to now we can actually have applications. And really, there was a Cambrian explosion when Apple decided about a year or two later to open up an app store to third-party developers. And so that provided opportunities to develop new apps. Where was the logical place to do this? It was in the cloud, because these are opportunities that you really need to take advantage of, with speed. And also when you're dealing with, with smartphone apps, you're dealing with traffic spikes that are kind of unpredictable and therefore kind of hard to forecast if you're trying to basically plan some capital purchases for your data center. So cloud was just a natural for that. In the mid-teens, as cloud really started to really prove itself, especially with new generation apps and opportunistic apps. You saw what I would call the economic phase, this is really the coming of age of software as a service services, such as like Workday and all those. So it started to provide sort of a roadmap to enterprises to start to look at, well, not just the smartphone apps or the mobile part of engaging your customers, but now you could actually start to put some line of business applications up there. So it was really a phase of selective migration. What I proffer in that, is that what we're entering in the 2020s, in the third decade of the 21st century, is really we're starting to look at the transformation side of all this, which is that now we've really proven this out on a tactical scale. We've proven this out with new apps. We've proven this out with line of business applications. How can we use the cloud at this point to really transform the way we do business and to transform basically IT infrastructure? And the key driver of all this is that enterprises are really seeking, why are they considering this? They're seeking the operational simplicity and the flexibility and the agility and the fast time to benefit that cloud native deployment, and I emphasize cloud native deployment, can enable. So we'll talk a little more about that here. The thing is that this is where we look at, and basically our core question here in this part of the session discussion, which is what are the paths to the cloud? What types of applications to move, how to move, what type of cloud service? What we're really going to spend time on is really what type of cloud service here. And basically, you can basically choose to to re-platform, let's say, your existing applications on premises, or you can decide that maybe some of these systems, especially systems that have PIA data, really do not belong in the cloud, or that end of period reporting, this is something which you've always run on premise, and it's not something where you gain business advantage. It's basically where you're just satisfying your requirements, whether it be to your shareholders or to the SEC or to regulatory authorities. And if it ain't broke, don't fix it. There's also been a tradition of with operational BI, and that's where the lines start to blur in terms of where this goes into the cloud, or with existing applications, or whether you stick with it on premise. And then there's basically the chance to really do some replatforming. And this is where we start to look at some of these new generation applications, born in the cloud applications. And when we start to look at transformations, such as basically the rationalization of data warehouses, or basically of new operational systems, because now we're basically conducting business in more channels than we had before. And so this really gets to the how part of the question, how to really move to the cloud. You can move existing systems to the cloud. We showed in the last slide. And you can take what we call a lift and shift strategy, which is essentially, you're just moving these applications that were running on premises to the cloud so that you don't have to worry about infrastructure. You're not changing the way you run those applications. You're not changing those applications or databases. You're just doing a tactical movement. And this is good essentially this really makes sense for applications where you have relatively stable traffic and resource consumption patterns. It's not suited for apps with transient or spiky workloads, but chances are you weren't running those apps on premises anyway. And here basically, the big change outside the fact that your budgeting is changing from CapEx to OpEx is that instead of tracking capacity utilization, which you would on premise, where you basically want to try and utilize as much as that capacity that you already paid for, in the cloud, you haven't paid for that capacity. Instead, you're paying for resource. You're going pay as you go. So your criteria here in managing costs really gets down to essentially cloud resource consumption, not capacity. Now there's the other side of the coin, which is lift and transform. This is where we really talk about the real transformational opportunities, where you get to essentially transform the way you do business, transform the way you run applications, transform the way that you manage data. And this is really where where the true transformational advantages of the cloud come in. This is essentially where you start looking at cloud native architecture, cloud native implementations, basically containerization, microservices. In many cases, it may also involve separating storage or compute from storage, so that essentially you can basically ramp your expenses based on the amount of compute needed at any one time. And this is especially suited for apps that have those transients, as we mentioned in the last slide. This is really where they belong. This is really where you get to harness the economics and the agility of the cloud. And so what this means is that, what lift and transform means is that elasticity. We were just kind of hinting about this before in terms of managing expense. Elasticity replaces capacity. Because even though, okay, there's no such thing as truly infinite capacity, as far as you're concerned, as basically a customer of the cloud provider, you have access to as much capacity as they can provide you. So elasticity really becomes more the chief architectural concern here when you're doing a transformational route. Operations, one thing that doesn't change between lift and shift and lift and transform is you still need to make decisions on which workloads you want to prioritize. Yes, you can take advantage of virtually infinite capacity, but do you want to pay for everything? Or chances are, unless you have a blank check, you want to prioritize. Keep in mind the fact that compute is your dynamic resource, and there are many different options about how you pay for all this. This is basically a whole separate topic on itself. We'll just skim it here, which is that you can decide to basically reserve your instances, and it's like reserving anything. You're always going to get your lowest per unit cost if you can predict your costs way ahead of time. And that's really good for very stable workloads. You can have on demand, which is for the transients, and then which is probably good essentially for basically most cloud applications. But there may be some of these basically should I say opportunistic or applications which you don't have to run all the time, but basically when you have the opportunity, if the price is right, that's where spot instances concern. That's the spot market. You always hear that in commodities. Well, it's the same thing in cloud. Cloud compute is a commodity, and when there's less demand, cloud providers will basically run, often like reverse auctions, for getting that capacity. So that's good essentially for very opportunistic apps. In terms of infrastructure, lots of options for compute and storage, which you get a chance to match the workload. That it also is basically the subject probably of a PhD seminar or a thesis. We won't go into that here. And there are also new options when you go a transformation route to really take advantage of some of the latest innovations in machine learning, not in terms of using in your applications, but for running those applications and databases. How what are the best what are the best ways to pay for this? What are the best compute instances or storage instances to use? You can start turning machine learning on this, and it can start to provide that sort of advice on how to use the cloud, most effectively. And of course, there are many different types of cloud services. I've simplified it to two, buckets here, which is unmanaged, versus managed. And unmanaged is basically going up in EC2. Essentially, you're just renting infrastructure. You're running it yourself. You're doing provisioning. The other end of the spectrum is the managed side, where the vendor essentially prescribes that infrastructure and prescribes all the configurations. And your choice is basically to choose service levels. And there's several broad categories of service that are involved here. There's software as a service, and this is what Salesforce made famous. This is where you have an application. Salesforce runs this application. You decide how much of it you want to subscribe to. You don't make any decisions on infrastructure or anything like that. Salesforce does that. There's platform as a service, which is then the tools that are run as a service. That could be application development as a service, integration as a service, or what's really most relevant to our discussion here, database as a service. And these are packaged services where the vendor prescribes all the settings and configurations and manages the operations delivery. There's some variations here, but theoretically the vendor should be able to take care of things of like healing and software updating and patching. That should not be your concern. As I said, theoretically, there are many different gradations of managed services, but let's take that as our starting point here. And I'm a bit of a bigot on managed services. This is where I believe that most customers will get the biggest bang for the buck, from their use of the cloud. Because these services are already been pre-optimized for the workload. Who's going to know the type of workload that's running better than the vendor that's running it? And we'll talk about that with Redis in a moment. Who's going to know best how to optimize in terms of the types of instances to run, the Redis database, not just as cache. This is designed for operational simplicity because it takes most, if not, most of the decisions off of your back in terms of, what type of infrastructure to use and how to provision it and so on and so forth. It also reduces or eliminates the need for customers to manage that infrastructure, those ugly tasks, and manage things like software patching and updating. What it really does, it enables you to focus on addressing the business challenge that you have. And more specifically for database as a service, it automates provisioning. It should automate patching, updating, self-healing, failover backup, and replication. When you are shopping for database as a service services, these are the key questions you should be asking the provider. Does that provider take care of those, those housekeeping functions? So again, my own bias, but my take is that managed cloud services really can deliver the benefits of the cloud, more quickly. Now, don't forget security. It doesn't stop outside your walls. And again, this is not a webinar on security, but again, you need to basically look at, you have to answer questions to yourself. Can you trust that data in the public cloud? What policies or mandates apply? Do you have to worry about data sovereignty? Do you need to worry? And that gets down to basically choices of basically which regions you put that, cloud regions you put that data in. And that's also where when you're looking at database as a service, can you manage global instances where you may be able to partition data so that it stays in the company, in the country in which it's supposed to be resident, where it originates. It's a key criterion for evaluating managed cloud providers. I will say that arguably that public cloud providers, compared to your IT department, they may actually be in better position to deal with these core competencies, to basically keep pace with hackers. Given that, though, one thing I've not mentioned here, even if you use a managed service, security still is a shared responsibility. You are responsible for the backdoors. You're responsible for determining who can access your data, in what form. Can they see that data, or does it need to be obfuscated? Does it need to be masked or encrypted? It's ultimately your decision on that one. But anyway, so let's start cutting to the chase here about database as a service. One thing about what's the nice thing about open source databases is that as a customer, you have a lot of choices in terms of where you want to run this, and who wants to, and who you want to take it from. And Redis being an open source database, there are many different cloud managed Redis services out there. Most of them arguably are running Redis as just a cache. Now it's a full-blown database. So here are just some of the questions to ask, and especially if you're looking at in an open source database or service. How current is the version in that open source? And does it feature the latest APIs? And the fact is, depending on the open source database, there may be some change, some differences or subtleties in licensing, which means that third parties may not necessarily get access either to the current version or to the latest APIs. You have to look at how feature complete is it versus what features do you want out of that database. You want Redis as a cache, it's one thing. If you want to take advantage of Redis's multi-model capabilities, that's another, and that's something which you need to check. What's the scalability, the performance, the SLA promises, service level promises? What can the database as service provider offer there? You need to compare that, and compare that also to your needs. And then also there's some of the more global sort of considerations, and I'm talking global in terms of being more general, which is that you have to decide to yourself, where do you want your dependency? Do you want to be dependent on a specific cloud provider? And there are advantages if you want to use that cloud provider's services, or do you want to basically have your freedom of choice in terms of operate Redis in whichever cloud that you decide you want to operate it in? Are you going to need multi-cloud support? And that's we may talk about this a little bit later. My own beliefs on multi-cloud is that for most customers, it's going to mean freedom of cloud, but there are going to be some scenarios, especially in regulated industries, where you may be required. Let's say you're a bank. Let me say, look, for basically, since you're supposed to be always on, that you cannot have a dependency on a single cloud provider. You may need to run some disaster recovery instances in a second cloud. So you might have, let's say, 5 instances in AWS and 2 instances, in either Google or Azure, or the reverse. That's going to be basically an internal policy decision. As I mentioned before, you want to look at, to what extent do you want to leverage ancillary cloud platform services? The interesting thing here, and with Redis, there is that possibility, is that you could, with some cloud providers, you could have it both ways. In other words, you could still have the choice of getting your service from Redis, but still be able to take native advantage of that cloud provider's, ancillary services, such as in areas like machine learning and so on and so forth. Anyway, so more specifically, where does Redis Enterprise Cloud play? Let's cut to the chase here. For one thing, it is cloud independent. It will allow you to use the public cloud of your choice. Redis Enterprise Cloud runs in AWS. It runs in Azure. It also runs in Google Cloud. It's also designed to work seamlessly if you have an on-premise implementation of Redis Enterprise. It's designed for that. Performance, basically, Redis will guarantee consistent, low latency data across, whether you're talking about on-premise, private cloud, or public cloud deployments, subject, of course, to whatever, what your network connectivity is, or what type of virtual private, let's say, connection, virtual private cloud connection you have. But specifically, this can make a real difference, especially for, say, gaming. Redis guarantees, in its cloud, in its enterprise cloud, sub-millisecond performance. So that can be key for gaming. Could also be key for fraud detection, especially when you start seeing some of these zero-day real-time instances. It's also Redis Enterprise Cloud also supports globally distributed deployment. And that can be key. Basically, if you have a banking application and you have customers in Germany and you're based here in the States or elsewhere, that can be important there. It can deploy across multiple cloud regions also via an active multi-master support. And that may be key in terms of how you want to keep your, keep your transactions consistent. And they do guarantee 5 nines upgrade or uptime. That could be an upgrade, depending on where you're coming from. But anyway, so basically, with our Redis Enterprise Cloud, you can unify your data across clouds and across the globe. Again, deploying across multiple clouds, multiple regions via active-active gives you seamless conflict resolution. And essentially, it's kind of like acting globally, but thinking locally. It can give you local read and write latency across clouds, across geo-regions. Same with disaster recovery and instant failover. So it gives you that global distributed capability, but with the advantages of local low latency. So what are the takeaways? Enterprises are, why we have this discussion, enterprises are seeking the operational simplicity and agility of the cloud. There are many paths to get there, so the choices you need to make. As I said, my own belief is that managed cloud services deliver the benefits of cloud, the fastest and most, and deliver the most benefits of the cloud. But again, there are managed cloud services. They are not all alike, and it's especially true when it comes to open source, where it may seem you may have many versions of the same service available from different cloud providers. There are differences. Redis Enterprise Cloud differentiates with performance and skill and availability with hybrid and multi-cloud capabilities. So at this point, let's go on to the next stage of our discussion, and I'd like to turn back over to Mike.
Hey, thank you, Tony. Great presentation, a lot packed into the journey to cloud, importance of hybrid and multi-cloud, as well as the triggers that really architects and developers need to think about and prioritize when building enterprise-grade applications. So at this point, like Tony said, let's begin the fireside chat portion of this webinar. And Venkatesh, again, it's good to have you here. I'll start with you. You guys at Sharechat really took the cloud-first approach and built Sharechat app from the ground up, leveraging microservices and modern infrastructure. So what really be interesting, I think, for the folks listening in is to, have you share with us what were the key factors in this decision-making from the architect and developer standpoint? And then really, what were the business benefits that you were seeking by doing so?
Yeah, well, firstly, thanks, Mike and Tony. It's great to be here chatting with both of you. And by the way, great presentation, Tony. Enjoyed listening to a lot of it. Now, as with most companies, the selection of cloud was inherently easy. We picked a no name at that point of time. And while that helped get us off the ground with minimal to zero investment, we did not always have a built out microservice architecture to begin with, right? So that's what the cloud does. It makes life too easy. So a lot of our code was split between some services, some monoliths, and a lot of Lambda functions to begin with. So the cloud inherently makes things horizontally scalable. So you don't see any initial challenges as much until you start to cross a certain traffic threshold, and then your employees don't fit into a single conference room anymore, right? So then you start the process of looking internally and seeing where you could break things up, getting things to respond faster, programming language choices, database decisions on SQL versus NoSQL, and all the other fun arguments. And then I've always told people this, right? So there isn't a perfect architecture, but the true test of architecture is something that lasts much longer than something without an architecture at all. So in an ideal world, you should expect a re-architecture every 18 to 24 months. Otherwise, as your traffic increases, as things change, as patterns change, you will encounter challenges that will bring the entire company down to a crawl.
Those are great points. Tony, I'm curious to hear your thoughts in terms of what you hear and see from the folks, as companies grow, because growth definitely happens. So as companies grow, how do you see your clients and some of the folks that you talk to deal with that growth and really the changes that Venkatesh talked about?
Well, it's really interesting. It's kind of funny that traditionally we could say, well, hey, this is a legacy brick and mortar business, and then you take a look at something like Venkatesh is coming. Oh, they're a digital online company, and their rules don't apply to us. And what I think we're finding more and more is that the rules that apply to basically Sharechat apply to basically mainstream companies, mainstream enterprises. whether you're B2C, whether you're B2B, whether you're a product, whether you're a service, and you need to basically evolve, with your customers, with the market. Take a look at the upheaval that it's kind of hard to ignore basically the gorilla in the room right now with COVID-19. It changed the global economy literally overnight. And companies basically, like, for instance, like distilleries said, like, oops, there's been a shift to making hand sanitizer. Oops, okay, we satisfied that bump in demand, but what now are the long-term capital investment implications of going this direction of keeping this business? Same thing, you're finding also the same basic disruption happening with travel, retail, virtually every business, almost every business out there. And so the fact is, the types of rapid re-architecture that Venkatesh is talking about, you need to expect to re-architect every 18 to 24 months. And I'll say after COVID-19, that long? I'm sort of half joking there. But the fact is that, so the thing is that what I'm seeing right now is that a lot of business, we've been taking this, we've been saying this for, ever since basically the .com era, that, you need to, innovate and be agile. And COVID-19 has really driven that home. And out of all this, actually, one thing I see coming out of all this is even more, movement to the cloud, because businesses need to focus on what is their core business. And so therefore, that's why I'm expecting, I devised those charts about transformation in 2020 before all this happened. It's just going to accelerate all that.
Yeah. No, it's really interesting. Actually, COVID-19, it's a really good segue to what I was thinking about asking you next, Tony, which is, let's talk about TCO, right? Because the whole motion for COVID-19 has really changed a lot of industries, right? In today's environment, it's becoming more and more important than ever for customers to think about, the cost of ownership and the value that they get. So one of the key factors folks are really looking at when migrating to cloud is TCO. However, it can get really messy when you're in hybrid state and just starting to move into the cloud. So how do you really see customers optimizing for TCO in this hybrid world and in this world where the change is the new norm and so rapid?
Well, okay, I'm going to say that we're all learning as we go along. Because number one, what we're seeing at the same time is the emergence of quote-unquote hybrid cloud options. I wasted about 6 months of my life earlier this year trying to basically track that market. And the fact is that, that itself we're still at a very early stage. There are many different definitions of hybrid cloud in terms of what you can do on premises, what you can do in the cloud. And that's very real. I think getting back to your core question about TCO, the first thing, and I mentioned this as a kind of like an ongoing motif in my slides, is that you need to balance off. It's a trade-off. Service levels, versus basically resource utilization. You need to prioritize workloads. And even if the workload is high priority, how high a service level do you need? And the fact is that more likely than not, essentially, that answer, even within the same application, will vary. And so you may have, this is where essentially you may say, this is where I may be tiering my data. This is where I may be saying, like, maybe certain, maybe I might be tiering by regions. So you really have to take a really close look in terms of your operations, and you need to match that up with the resource that you're using. When it comes to cloud, that it really comes down to that. I don't want to say simple, equation. It's not a simple equation, but it's a simple consideration: your resource versus your need.
Yeah. No, it's good. It's interesting you mentioned learning. Venkatesh, you guys, as your business grew, as you started to think about architectures and the needs of your business and your customers and how you had to evolve your architecture, it's interesting to note here and bring it up that you guys decided to migrate from AWS to GCP. So I'd be curious, I think, to Tony's point, as well as sort of go a little bit deeper into your journey. What were your motivations, both on the technology side as well as on the business side, and what advice do you have for sort of companies that are in this mode, thinking about how to grow, how to go global, how to react to the changing environments in the business?
Yeah, I think when you start out, the selection of the provider doesn't matter as much. But at scale, the discussions are so very different, right? You encounter problems that a lot of companies actually don't. And they're usually centered around, the choices of moving or not moving around three primary topics. Number one, are you happy with the scale and tech support that you get from the existing cloud provider that you are on right now? The second option is this the partner that you would like to align with for the many, many years to come in the future? And the third thing that you want to think about is this the right cost at which you want to spend all the money on, or do you want to sort of utilize the cost for spending things on your core product? So you take these three high-level factors and you keep breaking them down into quantifiable and measurable metrics, right? So you create this nice scorecard across all your different options. And in our case, we did not have too many options given our scale. So we had to go with just the top three providers in the world as far as cloud providers are concerned. So, on one hand, it actually limited our choices. On the other hand, it made it pretty hard because we just had one chance to get it right. You couldn't experiment on a cloud provider and then go to another one and then keep going to another one. It just doesn't work that way. But we went through an extremely thorough evaluation process. We did a lot of cost analysis. We also migrated a few of the workloads to see how Google would end up sort of taking it up. And ultimately, we ended up choosing Google Cloud to do the full migration over. It took it took about 4 to 6 months for us to sort of make it happen. A lot of it went into planning, but ultimately, I think it was an exercise that was absolutely worth it, and we are pretty happy with it so far.
That's great. No, you hit some really key points, Venkatesh. Thank you for sharing that perspective and then journey. And then Tony, from that perspective, he talked about tech support, he talked about partnership as well as TCO, and touched a little bit on the cost of it, which I think is really interesting because I do want to double click on that point a little bit with you, because you also spoke about the journey that customers have between open source and managed services to the enterprise, right, side of the things. Precisely, being able to have that right level of support and partnership to be part of the journey is important. But curious to hear your thoughts, or what are the top considerations when it comes to data layer, right? That you hear from customers who are looking to migrate to cloud, but also want to keep the hybrid environments.
Well, okay, the first thing here, and I want to, first of all, to respond a little bit to what Venkatesh was saying. Partnership is huge. And I think that also basically has implications on how you decide what you want to do with the data layer. Basically, you have to, and it's what you're doing with cloud provider here. It's the same as any enterprise software decision. You're looking at, this is the same thing we were deciding back, during the Y2K days. Basically, who's going to be our enterprise application provider? Who's going to be our database provider? It's the same thing with cloud, because they have, one is that you have to take a look with cloud is how are you going to be able to, how are they going to help you safeguard your data? How are you going to be able, and with security, it's a shared responsibility. And so therefore, how comfortable are you with basically in terms of how the cloud provider basically protects your data? Do they have a policy, for instance, that they encrypt all data, or do they leave it up to the customer? You have to decide basically what's the right decision for your organization. You also, in terms of the data layer, you need to look at essentially, what type of storage options there are. Also, though, and this is sort of, this goes along the consideration of what you do with the data. Number one, are there any types of, let's say, data integration or governance technologies or tools that you want to take advantage of? Are there any ancillary services? So let's say I'm putting Redis Enterprise on Azure or Google or whichever cloud. Are there other services from that cloud provider that you want to take advantage of? And so again, these are a number of the impacts on data layer one are basically how is it secured, how is it physically stored, and then what and what types of services can you take advantage of with it. So I basically bring it down to those three considerations. Okay,
got it. Thank you. So Venkatesh, one of the things that's really, I presume this, that you have a massive amount of data being the scale that you have, a number of users that you have. And for this data, I imagine that you need real-time fast data processing. You also need high availability and scalability to really provide those awesome experiences to your customers to create the differentiation. So I'd be interested to hear, and I'm sure the audience will be as well, is what are the requirements as you look to build a data layer to support your cloud investment? And you know, speaking really from that data layer perspective, how did really Redis Enterprise Cloud solve those challenges for the modern cloud native applications that you're building?
Yeah, so you know, in today's time and age, speed is everything. Speed is king, right? So our in-memory storage requirements are huge, and we actually store terabytes of data in memory. And every backend call that gets made relies on multiple such stores to return a single successful response to the user. So each of their uptimes is extremely critical for us. Most of our users, in fact, I would say all of our users are almost exclusively on mobile phones and on various kinds of mobile networks with different bandwidths. So the application needs to be super responsive as well to give them that top-notch experience. So keeping the round trip time as low as possible, key uptime values were essential to the post-migration values that we were looking at. We looked at so many custom solutions, but then could not come close to what Redis Enterprise could offer in terms of performance, scale, and primarily their support. And our performance numbers with Redis have been fantastic. We have been able to achieve sub-millisecond latency ranges almost consistently, even at our peak traffic, which varies quite a bit depending on the time of the day. Now, for monitoring, the Grafana dashboards have been super insightful to know exactly what is going on. And every time the support team has gotten back to us with regards to performance, the responses have been top-notch. We have gone through numerous rounds of post-migration optimizations with the Redis support team, and I can attest to the fact that it was definitely a very seamless experience. You know, I would give it my top marks in my experience with you know, third-party cloud providers and companies that I've dealt with over my course of time.
Well, couldn't ask for better endorsement, Venkatesh, but honestly speaking, it's really heartwarming probably for all of us here at Redis Enterprise to really think about, you know, to hear from a happy customer. And, you know, Redis really is known for that performance, the scale, and we do take a pride in sort of making sure we are there for our customers when they need us and, you know, as often as they need us. So Tony, the segue that I wanted to make, because you hit up on partnership earlier, you also hit up on sort of the key needs for data layer journeys. One of the things, and slightly segueing into it, is you know, the challenge that I hear from customers and I hear from you know, a lot of times is that this vendor lock-in, right? And we hear that a lot. And in some considerations, would love to hear your considerations of what customers should think about when they're thinking about not getting locked into sort of a one particular vendor, but also when they're really thinking about, you know, moving their workloads from on-prem or keeping some of them in on-prem and some in cloud.
We'll put this, okay, let's put it this way. I want to make sure I was off mute there. Every enterprise, systems decision is going to involve a choice of where do you want to have that critical relationship. There will be a critical dependency. And so, for instance, just for argument's sake, I could take, AWS or Amazon Elasticache and decide, okay, I'm using Redis as a cache, but my dependency is on Amazon. Versus I can take, Redis Enterprise on whichever cloud, and I decide at that point that, my strategic relationship is with Redis. And so, really, I tend to view this. I mean, I don't like to use the term lock-in because, ultimately, unless, let's say, you're doing the IT equivalent of living off the grid, there's going to be some lock-in at some point in terms of you have a strategic relationship with a particular provider. I prefer to say, like, where is my strategic relationship? And, which is the, is it going to be the cloud provider, or is it going to be, basically, or is it going to be the database provider? And by the way, this is no different from the decisions that we've made ever since, we've making decisions on, any type of enterprise system. Where, in the old days, it was like, what mainframe hardware platform were we going to be on? Because we're just going to write all our applications in whatever languages were on that platform. When we got to package software, okay, then it made mainframe, we got, less relevant, and it was like, okay, which package are we, is going to be the key, or is it going to be the database? So this is basically just the latest, iteration on basically a choice that IT and businesses have had to make, since the dawn of computing. And so it's really going to be a case. I don't want to think of it as locking. I want to think in terms of where is basically going to be your key, who's going to be your key partner. That's really, to me, how I would frame the question.
Great answer. Venkatesh, one of the things for the audience and the folks looking to move to Redis Enterprise on GCP or AWS or Azure, what last advice, what learnings would you pass on? And really curious also to hear more from you and what's next for you on your path for building on top of Redis Enterprise.
Yeah, you know what? I'll give you my honest take here, right? So in today's world, there is no reason not to be on the cloud. So if you're still on-prem, you better have a solid reason why. And if your focus should be on the core product and not to spend time building a specialized DevOps team or a SRE team, then the cloud is for you. Now, I've seen that it's usually the fear of the unknown that forces companies to stay on-prem, but then with risk comes huge rewards. So for companies who are already on the cloud and still incurring huge costs, or you want to sort of see what, how the cost can be optimized, I would definitely recommend using that as a great excuse to research into other cloud providers. So let's face it, right? So migrations are not easy and it requires solid planning and support from the entire company. The initial days will be hard, but the benefits, I'm hoping, like it has happened for us, will far outweigh the total amount of time, blood, and sweat that you end up spending on it. And I've seen that the learnings we get, as part of the migration, as part of the entire process, for the entire company and you and the teams involved, will continue far beyond just the migration itself. Now, finally, talking about enterprise solutions like Redis Enterprise, they have a lot of testing and support baked in. Let's just be very clear about that compared to self-managed solutions. So definitely look at the options, run through the numbers, don't be penny wise, pound foolish, and see how you can offset the fundamental headaches related to maintenance and bake that into the costs. And once you do that, I would say, happy cloud shopping.
Thanks, Venkatesh. Well, that's the wrap for us, folks. Thank you, Tony and Venkatesh, for sharing your time and expertise. Thank you, everyone, really for joining us here today. It's been really fun listening to your insights, Tony and Venkatesh. And at this time, I want to remind folks again to make sure that you go ahead and download the paper. We do have a white paper that's available to you that Tony has written in terms of finding your path to the cloud. I think it's really insightful, and you would find it a very easy but very knowledgeable in terms of what are the really steps that you need to consider and think about. And last but not least, again, thank you for joining us. And please go ahead and try Redis Enterprise Cloud for free in the cloud. And with this, folks, have a good rest of your afternoon and your day. Thanks, everyone.